extreme storm chaser. We see tornadoes of all different shapes and sizes. But you can get yourself in a real bad spot, and these are the most deadly natural phenomena on the planet.
Hang on!
Shit, this is crazy! I have a lot of respect for the storm chasers who are out there doing work trying to learn more about these tornadoes.
Every storm chaser has different goals. There are the storm chasers that are trying to capture an incredible video. Then the research storm chasers trying to collect that valuable piece of data inside a tornado that will help us better understand the mysteries behind them and try to realize just how strong the wind speeds get, especially right near the ground.
But in this movie, this storm cell hangs around for 4 hours over one particular area. So there's a number of different tornadoes that occur during that system.
A wedge tornado, by definition, is wider than it is tall. And usually the strongest tornadoes are the wedges.
Which is this enormous machine of destruction that can have wind speeds as high as 300 miles per hour. That can just rip buildings and roofs off like they're just styrofoam. And to capture that was very intriguing to me.
And there was an EF5 on April 27, 2011 super outbreak in Mississippi that dug a trench in the ground. That was 2 feet deep, 50 yards wide, and 500 yards long. And that's the first case that I've heard of that. And Dr. Fujita, that came up with the rating scale. F0 is the weakest tornadoes, and F5 are the strongest. And they've since changed it to the enhanced Fujita scale. So you can have an EF5 tornado that's 20 feet across that has 200 mile an hour or greater wind speeds. And you can also have a mile-wide tornado that's weak, that's an EF0 or EF1. But Dr. Fujita theorized that tornadoes could get strong enough to dig that trench in the ground, but it was never observed in his lifetime.
Yeah! Are you getting this? No!
But what makes a wedge tornado unique is that it can split into multiple tornadoes that spin around like a merry-go-round. And in those sub-vortices, you can get wind speeds that are 500 or 600 miles per hour. And these tornadoes don't care what's in its path. They're going to keep going. They're violent. It's almost like a runaway freight train that can't be stopped, and it's heading for certain locations. But if you have a wedge tornado that's 1 or 2 miles wide that's sitting in the same spot, that's a recipe for disaster.
One of the most complicated things about making a tornado digitally is first was establishing that visual language of what type of tornado we were matching to.
And I would categorize and pick my favorite selects of the different types of tornadoes. And when we went to the visual effects companies, I would put the video on the left side of the screen and I'd put their digital simulation on the right. And I'd say, you gotta make it look exactly like this. Not close, but exactly.
What we've discovered was this is not a movie about tornadoes. This was a movie about debris and trees and the environment, how it interacts with the tornadoes.
And then trying to find that right balance to make it really feel like this digital world is a real world, and they're in fact in it.
And then the other sequence is the rope tornado sequence, which is they're driving down the road and they see multiple vortices touch down in different areas, destroying houses and causing total devastation.
And usually a tornado will go through a life cycle. It'll touch down, a lot of times as a cone. If the conditions are right, it'll expand into a wedge tornado. And as that dry air wraps around it and chokes it off from the storm, it'll tighten it up into a rope. And that's usually the phase just before they're dissipating. But you can also get some of the strongest wind speeds in rope tornadoes because they're very concentrated in a small area. I've seen a small rope tornado that was very violent with intense motion hit the back end of a semi-truck and lift that up, and it left the front end on the ground. But I've also seen a wedge tornado in Canada split into 3 subvortices, and then those are even splitting into multiple tornadoes as well, subvortices, and then merge back together into a wedge tornado and go back and forth again. And it all depends on its interaction with friction. So the wind is pulled into it, and they'll break up into miniature tornadoes and then go back again and oscillate. And it's those rope tornadoes, or the small suction vortices, that will cause one house to sustain complete damage, whereas the one next door will be totally untouched.
Then you have the fire tornado, which is actually a real phenomenon where when a tornado gets above a real fire, it sucks the fire up and creates a fire tornado.
So over the hottest fires, you get intense updrafts as well, and it can tighten those into violent fire-nados. And I've always wanted to measure the wind speed inside a fire-nado, but when you get fire, you've got bigger problems than the wind speed. I've also seen a tornado, for example, in southern Mississippi at night that hit a gas station, and it also hit a power grid, and you just saw these explosions, and they quickly get engulfed by the tornado, and it's so amazing scientifically that it really is almost like a living, breathing organism.
And that was probably one of the more challenging things because effects companies have been able to get realistic fire. But the problem is when they put all the forces in their simulation to actually be realistic of what the tornado would be at those forces, it looked totally fake because it was almost hyperactive the way the wind was blowing the fire so much.
But there is internet reference of an actual fire tornado that we use extensively. We wanted to make sure that that fire looked, and the audience believed so much that that was real.
I think the biggest thing is they did the best tries on set to create their own fire tornado, taking a bunch of fans, fuel, lighting it on fire, and trying to get a twist out of it. And there was a lot of really nice footage of that. However, our tornado is approximately 100 feet high. So the biggest challenge would probably be how we achieve the scale of that tornado with the fire, and it looked fantastic.
Supercell storms that produce the strongest tornadoes, and as an extreme storm chaser, those are what we're interested in. And supercell storms are also capable of producing massive hail, baseball, softball size. We've even seen hailstones 7-8 inches in diameter from supercell storms because those updrafts are so intense. They suspend the hail in the atmosphere until they're too big, then they fall out and shatter windshields of storm chasers underneath them. Well, the strongest of tornadoes almost have a mind of their own. And so I've seen tornadoes that had a bunch of tornadoes inside, and then it'll congeal back into one tornado, then new ones will form, and it becomes very complex with a tornado. It's not just a solid tube, but you'll get all kinds of spin-ups and different vortices of all shapes and sizes and strengths.
In our film, you get the unique meteorological events where you get the right storm front and you get the right humidity and temperature and all these aspects that can basically create the perfect conditions to propagate an enormous wall cloud, which is basically the beginning of a tornado. And that supercell then rotates, and if the winds and the humidity and temperature and all the factors are correct, it will develop into a tornado.
There they go. They just converged. We are looking at wind speeds inside the funnel at over 300 miles per hour. This is definitely an EF5.
When we were making this movie, we were talking about having this be a mile-wide tornado, and well, when we were finished shooting and in post, a real tornado occurred that was over 2.5 miles wide. So our imagination of how big these storms could be, well, Mother Nature created something even bigger.
The largest tornado was last year in El Reno, Oklahoma. It was the widest tornado in recorded world history at 2.6 miles wide. And we were inside that one with our armored vehicles, and there's a merry-go-round of suction vortices. There are big cone tornadoes, small ropes spinning around violently like a merry-go-round. And we were in the back side of the tornado, and it ripped our hood off, removed the hood, and we never found it again. It never hit the ground and shot off like a Frisbee. And we went back and looked at the damage and never found it. But that tornado was very unpredictable because it expanded from probably a quarter mile wide, half mile, to 2.6 miles. And it was horrible, and it was very violent and a freak of nature, definitely.
Some may argue or debate whether it's because of climate change, but all we know is that in the last decade or so, we've had huge, enormous, unprecedented storms that have wreaked havoc with tons and tons of communities.
So it seems like the extremes are becoming more. When there are storms, they're stronger, there are more of them, and when there are not, you get drought conditions. But that's also an extreme. You know, the storms aren't the only extreme, but the absence of storms can be just as much of an anomaly. But when those storms are happening, they're getting stronger and causing more loss of life. Well, when I was really, really little, I remember being deathly afraid of thunder and lightning. But I think that fear turned into intense curiosity and an obsession for the science and trying to understand tornadoes and severe weather. But at this point, the data that we have inside a tornado is almost non-existent. We have a long way to go as tornado scientists. And so as an extreme storm chaser, we're doing research which indirectly helps people in the path of the storms, because if you better understand tornadoes and you know just how strong the wind speeds can get, then you can better design homes to withstand those really strong wind speeds and hopefully limit a lot of the loss of life from these tornadoes.